Hello and welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Kimberley Hoeppner today on your Tuesday, May 14th, 2019. Don't forget you can always get our forecast by dialing the 1-800 number 472-0391. You can also go online by typing in weather.gov/Alaska and just clicking around the state of your areas of your choice. You can always ask questions by writing to david.snider@noaa.gov. That's our TV lead. He'll be happy to answer any questions or take any suggestions you might have for our show. Now let's go on to the first topic of the day. We're going to go over the Alaska breakup map. This was updated on Tuesday, May 14th by our River Forecast Center at the National Weather Service. Now, taking a look at all the southern areas, as we know, they have seen breakup already. In the areas across the central interior and north, the most differences that we're going to see is that the continued melting and the breakup should continue to go very slowly, and therefore we're not expecting any critical rises at this time. Even the areas across the northern slope are starting to see temperatures above freezing, so they are expecting to see breakup beginning to happen as we go into these warmer trends. Now, on the flip side of the hydro, we've got fire concerns that we're going to be looking at for this week. We do have very warm temperatures that are going to be occurring for the first few days of the week, and this is going to be bring some fire danger concerns as winds begin to gust with the thermal trough that's across the region. So some gusty winds approaching 15 miles per hour, but staying just below a persistent wind at this point. We're also seeing some concerns with the drying and warming across the Copper River Basin. So be cautious on burning, but there are no watches or warnings out at this time. Let's take a look at the weather systems across the state. We are going to be focusing here along the west coast. We do have low pressure that's kind of spinning just off the west coast at this time. Meanwhile, we have a ridge that's building across the western waters, mainly just some clouds streaming along this system, and another trough that's moving up towards the western and central Aleutians. Now, across the Gulf of Alaska, we have a very broad trough pattern. Taking a look at this system, you can see the spin is centered over the eastern waters at this time. A little bit of moisture is making it inland ahead of this system, providing a little for the upper level waves that are moving across. That's enough lift and moisture to bring shower activity this afternoon. As you can see, we do have some thunderstorms that were reported just across the western interior, and then across the coastal areas, just mainly showers. So for the eastern areas of the state, some breaks in the clouds have allowed maximum warming. Seeing conditions warming up to the mid-60s this afternoon with 70 reported at Eagle. Now, shower activity is very light across the area at this time. Low pressure across the southeast, the Panhandle locations are seeing some developing showers ahead of organizing low pressure system. Nothing strong. A 999 millibar low is certainly nothing to be concerned about, but it will be bringing some rain later this evening. We'll get to that in just a moment. In the meanwhile, we do have a broad area of cloud cover across the Bering locations, so moderate cooler conditions in place with low pressure just to the south. Tonight, that low pressure here is moving up towards this chain, just mainly brings some rain showers and some winds gusting between 20 to 35 miles per hour. Now, across most of the northern Bering, it's going to be on the drier side, some showers for the eastern waters and along the Alaska Peninsula, with some fog developing with a colder air mass that's affecting across the northern waters. Now, let's take look across the northern interior of the state. That's where you're going to see your best chances for snow showers overnight, with stable air mass bring some fog in towards the north and northwest coast during the overnight hours. Other than that, we do have some showers across the state, some rain and snow showers, especially across the mountain areas, and then some possible snow showers along the Wrangell Mountains. Now, across the interior locations, some chances for rain, then tapering off late. and then a possible thunderstorm also across the interior locations. Here's this low pressure system, bring that rain activity up into the panhandle locations, so it should become a little bit more steady overnight. However, amounts are going to be relatively light, up to 1/4 of an inch, higher local amounts, and then the rest of the Gulf will see some showers. And then as we head into the day on Wednesday, this low pressure system is going to be pulling that moisture further to the west. So we'll see that rain moving into the Kenai and back towards Kodiak Island. And of course, this will reinvigorate some showers across the southwest as we head through the day on Wednesday. Now, some light rain will continue across the southeast panhandle locations through Yakutat as there's upper level waves that are rotating around the upper level low pressure system. And then we do have a thermal trough, so very warm air mass is going to be, temperatures on Wednesday are going to be the warmest this week so far. So expect afternoon thunderstorms to be possible across the Alaska Range and north locations. Now, for the north coast, they'll be seeing winds begin to taper off across the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, so that'll allow morning fog to linger. And then in the afternoon hours, that fog will improve the low clouds across the Brooks Range. So we'll see some improvement there across the north slope for your Wednesday afternoon. Now, across the west coast, we're expecting temperatures to be very much like they were today in the mid-30s. We do have this colder air mass that's going to be working its way down first across the northern Bering towards the central waters. In the meanwhile, this trough that's moving up at the same time is going to inhibit how far this colder air mass goes south. So generally, we'll just have low pressure that continues to circulate across the southwestern areas. And as we head into Thursday, some improvement with a ridge moving in after the low pressure begins to move south. The next ridge will bring some foggy conditions across the western areas of the Bering. And then the low activity is going to remain prevalent across the southern tier of the state, with those thunderstorms becoming more widespread as we get yet another warm day on Thursday. You'll see that in just a moment with our temperature maps. And the southeast will remain in a rain showery pattern, while the northern tier of the state will see more of an easterly flow pattern. Nothing in the ways of fronts to the north. However, let's take a look at the temperatures for tonight. Temperatures are going to be quite moderate across the interior, only dropping into the low to mid 40s, with areas to the south near 40, a little bit warmer there in the southeast with temperatures in the 40s. Across the Bering locations, mainly in the mid to upper 30s. And then for your northwest coast locations, all under 30, the freezing mark, so dropping into the main mid-20s. Actually, the coldest temperatures were at AKwx this afternoon, still staying under 30 degrees. But as we head into Wednesday afternoon, we will see the warming temperatures, with 75 degrees expected near Fairbanks and around those locations. Over Eagle, again, into the 70-degree mark. The rest of the state across the south are going to be well into the 50s, up to approaching the 60-degree mark, with those warmer temperatures starting to spread back into the southwest locations, with the temperatures getting up to near 50. Coastal locations to the north into the 30s, mid-30s for most locations, especially along the northwest to the Seward Peninsula. And then across the Bering, temperatures are going to be climbing into the mid-40s. Now, temperatures for the following night, Thursday night, or Thursday morning, we're going to see very similar patterns, with those temperatures still hanging into the low to mid 40s across the interior, back into the mid to low 20s across the northern interior of the state, and with the southwest seeing temperatures dropping into the mid to upper 30s, as well as much of the Bering locations. And across the Gulf Coast, expect temperatures in the 40s. Now let's go into Thursday afternoon. Very similar temperatures, 70 and 75 across the interior. So a repeat on Thursday of very similar temperatures.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And now on to the aviation section of the show. We are going to start off with looking at the southern tier of this state, which is going to be all in VFR conditions. It's not until you get to the northern tier where we're going to see MVFR and IFR widespread all across the north to the West Coast locations. Also, much of the Gulf is going to be in those conditions. MVFR across the southeast, also for the Panhandle locations to start off your Wednesday. Looking at the Bering, much of the Bering is widespread MVFR and IFR conditions, as well as the Alaska Peninsula. Going into the afternoon for Wednesday, we're going to see those conditions persisting and actually IFR spreading into the Alaska Peninsula locations. Now, much of the state is going to be VFR during the day, with afternoon thunderstorms there across the interior locations, and then across the northern areas of the state. Brooks Range is going to get out of the MVFR and IFR conditions. However, it's going to stay hugging the coast up there to the north. Now, for the Gulf locations, look for that MVFR and IFR conditions to start spreading a little bit further westward into the Prince William Sound. They're across the eastern Kenai into Kodiak. And then for the southeast, the Panhandle locations are going to be clearing up to VFR conditions in the afternoon, except for Yakutat and westward. Now let's take a look at the flying weather for Thursday morning, looking at widespread MVFR to IFR conditions across much of the Gulf locations. Again, the southeast Panhandle location staying out of it except for west of Yakutat. The peninsula and Kodiak is going to be seeing those MVFR and IFR conditions. A small area of the central interior will be VFR in the morning, and then across the north and northwest, once again, MVFR and IFR conditions. Looking for the west areas staying under mostly IFR conditions to start your day, including all of the chain and the Alaska Peninsula. For the afternoon hours, however, we're expecting improvement to at least MVFR conditions, except for along the west coast and just off the north coast there. So mainly VFR for the afternoon Thursday, looking at a little bit more spread of thunderstorms across the interior. For the Gulf waters, looking for most of the MVFR conditions to be across the western waters, while the eastern waters are going to be in a VFR day for Thursday. Now let's take a look at the passes in more depth. We have Anaktuvuk for Wednesday going from MVFR to VFR, and Adigan's going to follow suit with MVFR to VFR. Looking at your Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, that's going to be a VFR all day, and we'll see Rainy Pass in that VFR condition, as well as Windy. We're going to see Windy and Isabel Pass both VFR. VFR for Mentasta and VFR for Tenita, VFR for Portage, and VFR later in the afternoon for Chilkoot and White Pass, but you're going to start out with MVFR conditions on Wednesday. For your freezing levels tomorrow, we're looking at this white surface line here, draped off across the Brooks Range mainly, and then we'll see the levels from 2,000 feet across the western coast climbing to 6,000 feet towards the eastern areas of the state, and looking at the Gulf locations in the southeast with a climb of 4,000 to 6,000 feet as you head north. Now, most of the Bering is going to be in the 2,000 foot level with a climb along the chain from 2,000 to 6,000 just south of the chain. Looking at your icing, main concerns are going to be around those low pressure systems for the west coast and the western areas of the Aleutian chain, and they're the central areas of the Gulf waters, all above 6,000 to 7,000 feet. Now let's talk about the jet stream. The subtropical jet is staying quite to the south of the Aleutian chain and the Gulf of Alaska. Mainly have this polar connection here between 60 to 50 knots, with that troughing staying along the west coast. Now let's take a look at the conditions at 9,000 feet, mainly east to southeasterly flow, 15 to 25 knots, strongest there along the eastern Gulf waters. And then across the Aleutian chain, we do have a little bit stronger easterly flow at 35 knots. So let's go down and take a look at your 3,000 foot winds. We have low pressure persisting across the southern areas of the state with the strongest winds, very similar to the 9,000 foot levels around the one across the chain and the Gulf waters. So mainly between 15 to 25 knots. We're not going to see too much turbulence across the state for your Wednesday, with the main concerns across the northeastern areas of the state below 4,000 feet there, and then out towards the west with some isolated thunderstorms developing out there across the interior.
Welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service, and joining us today, two more people to talk about the augmented reality sandbox. It's Alana Valaji. She's a University of Alaska Fairbanks mechanical engineering student, helped design and work on the details to make this new type of sandbox there. Thanks for joining us, Alana. Thanks. And Courtney Breest, she's the outreach coordinator for AKwx, which is the experimental program to stimulate competitive research. It's a program funded nationally by the National Science Foundation, right?
Yes.
Okay. Alana, tell us about how you changed and adapted this version of the augmented reality sandbox. It's a really cool tool.
So Gina approached us with 3 goals for this new version of the sandbox. They wanted it to be compact in a light system that could travel around the state. They wanted it to be child-oriented, so we designed the sandbox to have 3 different levels.
Okay.
It's pretty cool. You can have younger children, you can have high school kids. I guess I should say high school teenagers.
Sure.
And then we also designed it to be more marketable, user-friendly, so that this could be seen eventually in classrooms all over the place, all over the state.
Okay. And you had a big hand in this, but this was a team approach, right?
Definitely. It was a really good experience for myself, for George Stevens, who we'll see later.
One of our hand models today. Yeah.
For 2 other members who aren't here today, Cody Klingman and Austin Hunt. And it was just a really good learning experience all around.
Very good. And this is something that is part of your learning experience as well, so you get to check a box in your education.
Yeah,
right?
it's a requirement for seniors of mechanical engineering at University of Alaska Fairbanks.
Very good. Very good. Well, it is a wonderfully inquisitive tool, fun to play with, and I hope to get my hands in the sand here in just a little bit. But it's also part of a bigger program, something that we were talking about a moment ago, AKwx, and that's what Courtney is here to tell us more about. What is AKwx and why do you need a sandbox?
Well, AKwx, as you mentioned, is a national program. We're funded nationally, but we're actually located statewide. We're at UAF, we're at UAA, we're in Southeast at UAS. And she mentioned, you know, taking the sandbox as an educational tool, and that's where I'm an outreach coordinator for the South Central test case.
Okay.
Our focus is on the Kenai watershed, and we are really interested in using these tools like the sandbox to interact with the students down there and get them interested in STEM and also communicate the research findings that we've been having throughout the state.
Okay. And one of those, as George and Eric are kind of changing the contours for us there from UAF to maybe something that resembles a little bit of something more of the Kenai watershed, which is one of your focuses for the study, right? And specifically looking at some of the changes there and how that impacts people and also the salmon.
Yes, it is all of our research is social and environmental.
Okay.
So we have social scientists working hand in hand with our environmental scientists. One of the things we're studying is Upper Russian Lake, and we have a researcher taking sediment cores from that lake. So one of the things we're going to use the sandbox to communicate is how the landscape changed over a long period of time, thousands of years, going from glacier, covered by glacier ice, to being filled with water. And then
that's what they're doing right now.
Exactly. So
live.
So they're moving
cool.
the water around. And then I think they've got some props over there, because we're also going to go a little bit more in depth and explain how the salmon got there.
Okay.
So using
there's
these,
the salmon.
Exactly. Oh, I think there's a few more.
Yeah, we like more salmon in Alaska. More salmon.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really taking the findings from our research grant and just trying to connect with the community and translate it in a really hands-on and exciting way, so people can, you know, interact with us as much as possible.
Well, sure. That makes the learning and the science real and quite literally in your face, rather than just some boring black and white paper that you have to read about. This is something that people can understand better because it's visual and they're touching and feeling and seeing these changes, right?
Yeah, and get them engaged. And then outreach is a huge component, and working with the younger students, and actually even, I mean, working with the UAF graduate and engineering students it's a huge part of our grant, and we really enjoy it.
Oh, it is wonderfully exciting. And so, Alana, you were telling us that this is built to travel.
Right.
And this is built to do more things than version 1. Where can this type of project go in Alaska? And what can it demonstrate?
I mean, we were hoping to eventually get to villages that were harder to reach, that you couldn't necessarily move a whole fixed instrument to, right? You need something that can pack up, fit in your truck bed. I mean, one of the most attractive parts of this project is that this was going to be something that was used past our graduation point. You know, this is going to be something that lives in the state for years.
Right, right. Well, it looks like you're well on your way with that. So what are, give me another example. What else can this show us? We've talked about the Kenai River watershed. What's the coolest thing that you've played in the sand with? What's your idea?
Well, I definitely enjoy the props, but we also like kind of building up a giant mound, and if you put some water behind it, you can make a little runway, I guess, and you know, demonstrate the effects of the hydrology by just putting up a dam and letting it all pour right down.
Okay.
And so that could, I think you mentioned it earlier, you could even demonstrate the effects of a tsunami.
Right.
Or something along those lines.
So it's not just topography, but it's also hydrology and coastal surge mapping and some of the coastal changes that we're seeing here in Alaska, and seeing what the smaller changes in the sandbox might do to kind of a real effect of a slosh or a push of water up on the coast. Tsunami inundation mapping, or even glacial dam release, as some has been demonstrated before.
Yep.
So wow, that's just an impressive thing. That it seems like the possibilities are nearly endless with this, and probably even more ideas that are popping up in your head too.
Yeah, as we speak.
Very cool. All right. Well, if folks want to get more information about EPSCoR, you guys are online. You're on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. AKwx, right? EPSCoR, Alaska EPSCoR, that is. And again, you guys are funded by the National Science Foundation,
Yes,
so
sir.
more to come from that, and a longer-term study there. Thank you, ladies, for joining us today. Congratulations on your hard work there. This is really fun. And for now, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and I'm going to go play in the sandbox there. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Now we're moving on to the marine segment of the show. We're going to cover the ice edge, which you're going to see continued melting into the southern Chukchi Sea as we head through the next few days there. And now across the Norton Sound, they're seeing ice rotting, so that's going to continue trends through the next several days as well. Along the eastern areas for Wednesday, look for southerly flow and offshore flow, except here towards the Lynn Canal, a little bit more of a southeasterly pull. We're seeing seas on Wednesday between 2 to 4 feet, with the higher seas towards the Dixon entrance. Outer waters will be between 15 to 20 knots, all out of the southeast, with seas between 6 to 8 feet. As we head into your Thursday forecast, expect generally an offshore flow pattern around 10 knots. Seas across those inner waters are going to be around 2 feet. And the outer waters will be mostly a southerly flow, becoming more easterly towards Yakutat. And seas on this day will be around 6 feet. Taking a look now at the northern and western areas of the Gulf of Alaska, Prince William Sound locations, more of an easterly flow between 10 to 20 knots. And then we'll see a southeasterly flow across the Cook Inlet, with more of a westerly direction as you head towards Kodiak Island. Now, the seas on this day are going to generally be between 2 to 5 feet, with lower seas across Prince William Sound and the northern inlet between 2 to 3 feet. On Thursday, expect the wind directions to primarily be east to north, more northerly across the Cook Inlet and Prince William Sound. Winds once again all under small craft, 10 to 20 knots, and seas on this day will be between 2 to 6 feet. Highest seas across the Gulf locations and the southern tip of the Kenai Peninsula. Now let's take a look at the Alaska Peninsula. Primarily a northerly flow on your Wednesday, becoming a little bit more westerly for Shelikof Strait, between 10 to 15 knots, so not a lot of impact there, between 2 to 4 foot seas. Heading into your Thursday, not too much change in direction, more of a northeasterly flow towards Kodiak Island, Shelikof Strait, and then across Bristol Bay areas, a little bit more north to northwest. Seas on this day will be 2 to 5 feet across the peninsula, and then Shelikof Strait, a little bit higher seas there, 8 feet for Kodiak Island area. That's going to be small craft there for Shelikof Strait, and then we'll see seas between 3 to 5 feet south of Kodiak Island. For your Wednesday forecast across the Aleutian chain, looking at primarily an easterly flow, uniform across the area, and then small crafts for much of the area as well. Seas on this day will be between 5 to 11 feet, the highest seas across the central and western Aleutians. Looking at your Thursday forecast, becoming more of a northerly flow across the area, but a little bit lower wind speeds on this day with seas between 4 to 7 feet, a little bit higher there, up to 8 feet across the central Aleutians. Now let's take a look at your west coast. We'll see a north to easterly flow across the west coastal locations, a little bit stronger there to the north, and seas on this day will be between 2 to 5 feet. Looking at Thursday, stronger flow coming out towards the west coast there. So we're picking up some small crafts, a little bit stronger winds on Thursday. Seas would be between 6 to 8 feet on this day. Now take a look at your north and west coast directions. Your eastern Beaufort Sea coast is going to be 25 to 30 knots, so small craft advisory for you. Otherwise, northerly flow across the area will be low impact with seas between 2 to 3 feet. And then we're still seeing ice cover across the north coast there. Now on your Thursday, persistent winds out of the east direction with a little bit stronger winds coming towards the Bering Strait, Kotzebue Sound there between 20 to 25 knots, so an increase in seas as well between 4 to 6 feet primarily. Now for tonight's weather, let's go ahead and recap. Low pressure systems bringing a chance of thunderstorms across the interior and the Yukon Delta there. Low pressure is going to stay south of the chain for the southeast. They're going to be seeing an increase in rain activity into Wednesday with rain spreading towards the Kenai Peninsula. Thunderstorms possible during the afternoon hours, drier conditions, winds persisting 20 to 30 knots along the north there. And then on Thursday, expect thunderstorms once again, primarily across the interior locations. Have a great night.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.